Hey everyone, welcome to Kittatinny Woodcraft, where my backyard is my workshop. At the time I'm filming this video, it is one of the 4 best seasons of the year, Han Solo season. But in all seriousness, it's the time of the year where everyone eats too much, starts to enjoy the crisp mornings, and of course, there's always football to watch. But for my family, it's also canning season for all the vegetables we grow in our backyard, which brings me to what we're doing today for my build. We're going to be building trays to hold all the canning jars in because for the longest time we've just been using the cardboard that the jars all came in. However, at this point they're about as sturdy as a limp noodle. So we're going to build these trays, help secure them. The wood we're using is actually cut-offs from the fence behind me that I built back in March. We'll be cutting these down to the right size, joining them together to make the bottom boards of it. With that said, let's go build. The first thing that'll need to be done with creating these canning jar trays is, as you can see, these aren't sitting flush against each other. There's a pretty big wobble in front of them. So the very first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to run them through my straightening jig I set up on my table saw. With that, we're going to just hack little pieces about blade width apart. That way they are flush against each other, and then when we go to glue them together, they're nice and tight and the glue will hold fast. I got the idea for my straightening jig from John Herenza. I apologize, I probably butchered that name. The link to his video is going to be down in the description. He uses a 2x2 piece of 8-foot long board that he cut down from a 2x8 board he had. And however, I wanted to take it a step easier, and I just ended up buying a U-channel, aluminum U-channel from the local hardware store. And I have that attached to the guide rail on my job site saw with 2 clamps. Let's go ahead and start cutting. I wanted to stop that montage right there and show you guys that after running both of these boards through a couple of times on each side, you can see how tight this grouping is now, just done with my table saw. You can also do this with a router or your circular saw, however that would be a lot more difficult because of the setting it up to get it perfectly straight. The one thing I did want to mention, as you're going through this, you want to make sure after each pass you turn, for safety purposes, you turn the saw off, adjust the fence, and then turn it back on before you cut, just so you don't cause any accidents that way. But like I said, as you can see, these boards are perfectly together now. These 3 boards I'm doing right now will be to make a bottom of a 3rd tray. I already have 2 other ones, as I mentioned, that I cut and are ready to go. So we'll be putting those together today, hopefully also, if not tomorrow, which will be a few seconds for you guys. Before we move on to the next part, the one part I did forget to tell you guys about was you want to make sure whatever side you start on, it's the side that gives you at least 2 points of contact, stable points of contact on this jig, because as you can see here, there's the bow is in the center of this board, and it's letting this thing wobble all over the place. Whereas if you do it this way, the 2 points of contact are up towards the top and the back, and that helps keep this a lot more stable. So that way when you do this as your first pass on this side, it'll keep the board straight, and then when you flip it over, it'll be straight again, and then you get perfectly straight sides. However, if you put it through like this, as you can see, you could be jimmying it the whole way through and you'll just never get a straight side. The next part I'm going to be switching to my miter saw. This part we're going to be cutting the 45 degrees into the edges. We're going to be cutting them down to the right length, and then we'll be going back to my table saw for the last part of this. For this, we need to cut 6 boards down to 16 3/4 because we'll have 3/8 of an inch overhang on both ends, and we'll have to cut the other 6 sides down to 12 3/4 because of the same 3/8 inch overhang on each side. Sorry about that. I actually got a phone call while I was recording this. All I'm doing is recording this on my iPhone. So unfortunately, every time someone calls me, it messes up the recording. And I thought I hit record, but I did not. However, I finished the rest of the sides, got them all mitered down to their 45-degree angles. I'm now going to go ahead and cut them down to the correct size on my table saw. I'm going to make these 4.5 inches wide. And to do that, and line it up with 4.5 inches, just like that. So now that we have this measured out to 4.5 inches, we'll start cutting and So I know that was very quick, but I ended up deciding to combine the 4-inch, cutting the pieces into the 4.5-inch width and cutting the dado out all together. Now that this dado is cut out, we're going to go ahead, I'm going to dry fit all the pieces together just to make sure it fits. So just slide, and if you did this right, it'll slide right in. The corners match up right where I was planning them to. Before I fully glue this, which I'll probably just not put on camera, is I'm going to have to go and sand this down just to make it nice and smooth, because you can see there's still glue marks from the glue up. I'll show you how I glued these with the other 3 that I just cut today for the third bottom of the tray. But for right now, I'm just going to show you guys how to glue this all together. And then just take these, and as you can see, these are all fitting together. There is slight warps in the board, and unfortunately that's just what comes with using this type of lumber for it. Obviously, if I was doing this to make it an heirloom piece or just look less utilitarian, I would have bought either a 1/2-inch piece of appearance board or some other nicer board to have made this out of. However, since this is just going to be sitting in a garage most of the year, and this isn't going to be on display other than to hold the jars, I'm not too worried if it's slightly askew or anything like that. Now that the dry fit is fully complete, and I can see it holds well, it's fitting together within my standards for this project. Since this is just for my parents, I know that sounds awful, but they're not too worried about the looks of it either. I'm going to go and grab a ratchet strap, which there is ratchet strap style clamps you can buy. However, I have not invested in one of those since this is just a hobby I do and not my full-time job. After we let the glue dry on that, we're then going to come in with dowel rods and just shore up these corners. That way this thing doesn't just fall apart on us at some point, especially because there is the extra warps in it that we wouldn't regularly get. And that'll be the process I use for all 3 of these. I glued up the boxes, and I already have this glued up. I didn't necessarily want to show you the process, I just wanted to explain it to you. All I did was place glue in the dados, and I placed glue on the mitered edges of these, stuck them together, clamped them with my ratchet straps as I mentioned earlier in the video, and then now I'm going to let it set for a while. Normally what I would do is I'd take an extra step, and usually on these mitered corners I would put a mixture of half water, half glue to prep the edges. However, I'm not too concerned about prepping them because they'll have the extra reinforced strength of the dowels. I'm now going to move on to building the handle part for these trays. The way I'm going to do that is I have a 1-inch drill bit that I'm going to be using for the width of my fingers. And to make sure I'm properly lining this up, I'm going to go, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be making 3 different lines from the top down. So now the first thing I'm going to do is to create blowout from either side. I'm going to drill in part way through this first and flip it over and drill the rest of the way through. And now that the holes are drilled the whole way through, the final thing left to do is just take my jigsaw and cut along the 1-inch and 3-inch line. So there we have our first handle. I'm going to repeat the process on this other side, and then once this is all done, I will show you guys the finished products. Here's one of the trays fully complete just to show you. I'll have a couple other pictures up after I'm done talking. Just a few final notes. Since they were made out of pressure treated wood, I'm not going to bother finishing them with any type of coating or anything. Also, I've already told my parents that these can't be stacked because of being pressure treated wood. They would eat away at the metal canning jars and lids, and obviously then any air that got in would spoil whatever vegetables they did can. I finally want to say thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and hammer that like button until it turns blue. Subscribe to my channel, that way you never have to remember how to spell Kittatinny again. And for the comments today, I'm going to pose a question and ask what your favorite joinery method is. Mine is definitely not mitered corners. I think they're more of a pain to keep lined up and everything. And because they are a little bit weaker, which is why I reinforced these with the dowel rods. My favorite, I'd have to say, are just regular butt joints and or rabbet and dado joints because of their strength and simplicity. Thank you again for watching my video, and have a good day.